sweeping a floor, cleaning a bathroom, or treating a patient. Just whatever you do your best. And I feel like that's a pretty good mantra for life. So.
That was the voice of Heath Ladd, entrepreneur, physical therapist, and co-founder of Dynamix Physical Therapy. Dynamix has locations all over our region. Heath and his co-founder built Dynamix from the ground up to be different, and it is paying off. Welcome to 40 by 45, the West Tennessee Business Podcast, sponsored by Tennessee Industrial Printing. Heath, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Kevin, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So Heath, you are the co-founder of Dynamix, which
That's
is
correct.
a physical therapy. How do you describe Dynamix?
It's definitely a physical therapy company. Russ, my business partner, and I look at more as an experience company. We want everybody that walks through our doors to have an experience, one that they tell other people about, family, friends, church members, counterparts, associates. But it's a physical therapy company. But overall, man, it's an experience company. It's a company that has a mindset, a very growth-oriented mindset. But yes, it started as a physical therapy company with a goal of just being different. Being different in the marketplace, being different in the industry in West Tennessee, and just with an overall vision of growth, empowerment, development, that's to our team, but then bleeds off into the customers as well, the patients as well. So
We'll dive more into that in a second. Let's start with Heath.
Sure.
So you grew up in New Bern. Tell me about that.
Well, and I would even say the Tri-Cities, okay, where Churchton, Edgewood, and Tatumville meet. So really even a suburb of New Bern.
And if you're saying a suburb of New Bern, you're
Yes,
getting pretty...
and I say that all to say I'm a very small town guy.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, think that I'm from, the city, but that is not true at all. I was raised on a farm, had a farming family. I had a dad whose mantra was, you're either working or you're working on a sport. So to say that, I played a lot of sports growing up, because the opposite of that would be me, in a field, usually doing some kind of manual labor. So that guy that makes you very interested in sports growing up when that's the alternative. But grew up in just a fantastic household. My parents, my mom, extremely talented lady. But she chose to stay home with us. She chose to focus on us, on her children's, growth, development, their livelihood. And I think that still shows up in myself and my two brothers as well today. So very, very structured household, very rules-based. But man, I can't say, really anything negative about my upbringing. Lived in, a very small house, probably 1,600 square feet or so. Shared a room with my brother for a good part of my life. I knew no different. And I have everything positive to say about my upbringing, but it was a very humble upbringing. Very involved in church. Like I said, very involved in athletics. And my parents just pushed us. They pushed us to do our best. And their thing was, grade, sports, whatever. Just do your best, and that's something that I feel like that I've carried with me, throughout my life. Whatever it's been, just sweeping a floor, cleaning a bathroom, or treating a patient. Just whatever you do your best, and I feel like that's a pretty good mantra for life. So
Yeah, absolutely. And so was it the heaviness in sports that led you into PT work?
It's funny that you ask that because actually it is. It is. Growing up, I played a lot of sports and I knew that, when I got done with sports, that I wanted to be involved in sports in some way. So didn't really want to be involved in coaching. But, so the other alternative is, kind of the medical side of it. Went to school, thought that I wanted to treat athletes, all day, every day. I want to treat athletes. But it's funny because, you have that mindset. And then, once you actually go through school, go through training, what have you, you see that there's a whole nother world out there. And, man, am I passionate about treating athletes? When I was in clinic, absolutely. But I became just as passionate about just helping everyday people, like we were talking about soccer moms, working dads, helping them to where they're able to play catch with their son or daughter. And helping the elderly patient whose husband has to help him to the restroom, or helping the husband whose wife has to help him to the restroom, helping change their life. So I became, man, just interested in all aspects of service as far as physical therapy goes.
And if you were to pretend like I'm a 5-year-old,
Sure.
tell me what physical therapy is.
So, physical therapy is the science of human movement. So physical therapists are experts in human movement. So let's say that you have trouble, raising your arm. Okay, we're diagnosing, all aspects that go into the voluntary movement of raising the arm, and diagnosing where the issue is, whether it's a joint issue, whether it's a fascial issue, whether it's a muscular issue, or whether there's some kind of compensatory motion involved. So, in short, physical therapists are experts in human movement.
And what's the school? Because I also hear about physical therapy assistants all the time. What's the difference between those two?
So physical therapist assistants, they get an associate's degree.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a 2-year plus 1. So it's a 3-year track in all. And then after school, they take a licensure test just like physical therapists do to become licensed physical therapist assistants. So physical therapist is a little bit longer road. Now it requires a 4-year degree. And then you go to 3 years of PT school, and it's an entry-level doctorate program now. So starting in 2007, I know at my former school, University of Tennessee, it was a doctor's program from there on out. So from 2007 until this date, it still is a doctorate-level program, but you do have to have a 4-year degree before you go to PT school.
Gotcha. Okay. So you got out before the doctorate?
I was the year before.
Okay.
I was. So I am a master of physical therapy. So I went to 3 years of undergrad and then did 3 years of physical therapy school.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. So when you started out in the field, what did you notice about maybe your first place in that physical therapy world?
I was very fortunate in my first place. I started out, it was at the sideline in Martin. I had a really good mentor, a guy by the name of Brian Smith, who actually, come full circle, is a part of our organization today. So it was kind of a full circle moment when he came on board. Great experience, but just like Russ, we had very common goals, and just realized that there were things in the industry that we wanted to change. And a lot of times, when you see change, a lot of times you have to be the change. So we sat down for a year and a half, and just collaborated and planned. Anything that you launch, if it's going to be successful, doesn't happen overnight. I mean, there's a lot of backroom work that goes on, as far as planning, strategizing, collaborating on, and as when you're launching a business, excuse me, you have to market on how you're different. Okay, so our planning was, how are we going to be different? We saw the industry here in West Tennessee, the physical therapy industry as a whole is one that was being just kind of stuck in the 90s. There wasn't a lot of innovation, there wasn't a lot of change. Everybody sort of practiced the same way.
Tennessee Industrial Printing is West Tennessee's commercial printer. They have built their reputation on delivering on time, on budget, and on target. Tennessee Industrial Printing delivers on complex printing projects, mailing projects, and fulfillment services. With a fleet of presses, they have positioned themselves to handle small and large volume jobs. I have been able to work with tips with many of my clients' projects, and they have delivered every time. Wayne and his team have continuously invested to ensure they have an efficient and effective option for commercial printing. Start your next project at tipsprints.com. So, and then you mentioned Russ, so co-founder. Tell me, how did you meet Russ?
So he was 2 years ahead of me in PT school. So we vaguely knew each other from PT school, but then he was actually friends with Brian, who I originally went to work with and worked for, and we met that way. He comes from a very, very similar background as I do. Farming family, a lot of structure, a lot of hard work growing up. His parents were business owners as well. And we met and we talked and just had very similar goals, very similar ambitions, and we thought, that a partnership would work. And luckily, what's turned out was, his strengths are some areas that are my blind spots. My strengths are some areas that are his blind spots. So it's turned out to be a really good partnership, and really, really fortunate that we met, that our paths crossed. So as I talk about Dynamix, there's a whole other person in the background too, and that's him. So very, very fortunate to, meet Russ, team up with Russ. And, like I said, I think it was ordained by God. Yeah.
You have a lot of thoughts about branding and things of that nature. During the planning phase, how were you plotting out like Dynamix is a cool name? Like, how did you guys approach that?
Yeah, for one, when deciding a name for us, our goal was always for Dynamics to be bigger than ourselves. We wanted to create something that, if something happened or down the road, one of us stepped away, the company keeps on going. The brand keeps on going. And I say that, we didn't name the company Ladd and Huffstetler PT for a reason. Is because, we wanted to recruit other people, along this vision because that's what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it takes. So, the first thing was we wanted to create, even a name down to the name as something that could stand alone, that, that wasn't associated with Russ or myself, obviously, but something that could stand the test of time. And then as our logo, like you talked about, wanted something simple, sleek, unique, but had meaning too. So, our goal is to create meaning in everything. If you look at our logo, the X represents how we're unique and different because we spell Dynamics with an X.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to feed off of that X, that difference in the logo. So the X represents our uniqueness. And if you notice, the X has a box around it, but there's tails coming out of the box, and that indicates that we're an outside the box company. Okay, and then if you look at the trajectory of the X, the tails coming out indicate that the X is moving forward and up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's a company of growth. So that's what the logo symbolizes as well.
Yeah.
So, our goal early on was, man, let's just create meaning in everything. It's not just because, or that looks cool, or what have you. Number one, can you brand it? Is it a logo that can stand on its own?
Mm-hmm.
Because, as we know in the app days, and this is even before the app days,
Mm-hmm.
everything's just sleek and simple now.
Yeah.
That can be recognized just by looking at the logo without any name underneath it. And that was our goal, with our logo and with our branding strategy was, number one, to create meaning, but then number two, to create something that could stand on its own. Even if you took, the name out from underneath, just like the Nike logo, if you see the Nike logo, you know what it is. You don't have to say Nike under it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was our goal, and that was our branding strategy was create something bigger than ourselves and create something that's visible, that can be visibly interpreted and seen, but then also has a very deep meaning that reflects back to the company.
Now, even from the beginning,
Uh-huh.
it seemed like you guys have been trying to take a different path, and you wanted to bring something to the market that was different. And I interviewed Tina from the company,
Uh-huh.
and she had a comment that maybe helped
Okay.
set up this question.
Sure.
A lot of places, they'll just want to send you through some exercises, very little, and some of them don't even touch you at all. But Dynamics has always been one where we're going to find what's causing that pain, clear it out, and then we're going to get you up and get you moving better. Instead of just putting you through a bunch of rigorous exercises, that's only going to hurt you worse. Trying to figure out what's driving their pain, and then trying to figure out release muscles, work on soft tissue, you name it. That's what has always set Dynamics different. I mean, because I've worked with Heath so closely, he has taught me everything I know, pretty much.
So you mentioned you want to bring something different to the market.
Uh-huh.
Tina talked about that. So thinking about what Tina just said, what were you bringing different to the market?
Yeah, so in the early days, we talked about earlier how when you're starting a new business, you've got to be different, and you've got to be different in a lot of different aspects. So in the early days, Russ and I traveled the country to see what other high level clinicians in Washington State, Michigan, Virginia, what are they doing, that we can bring back to rural West Tennessee, and I mean it was manual therapy, it was hands on care. I'm a firm believer in the power of human touch, but even taking that further, the power of skilled human touch. So we went and we learned just a lot of hands-on techniques. And like Tina said, in her interview, about finding the source of the problem versus treating the symptom. I think healthcare today, most of it is treating symptoms. But if you can find, the driver of the symptom, the central issue of the problem, you can correct the symptom so it doesn't come back in the long run. So our training was heavily involved in, treating the body as a whole, treating the body as a symptom. And the example I used earlier about, elevating your arm, so we need to screen your neck, your mid back, and even your low back and your shoulder as well to figure out why. So it's about figuring out why. It's always the why. Just in business, you got to define the why. In your treatment approach too, you got to find the why as well. So man, we traveled nonstop. and just learned, developed our skills, so that we could bring that back and start to instruct, members of our team going forward too, on our unique approach, because it's very unique. It's very labor intensive. It's very hard to learn. But again, when you're setting out on your own, it's got to be unique, and what we found was it works. I mean, it works, and I think the proof, is in the pudding. But it is a very, very high level skill set, very labor intensive. I mean, we require a lot of our team on outside of work, learning and training, to be the best they can be. Because when you're in private practice, okay, in our industry, we don't have a group of doctors at our back. We don't have a hospital at our back. We survive based on our skills. Okay. And if I'm not creating a wow experience with Kevin
To get referrals.
where are my referrals going to come from? Okay. So that was the mindset is, I always tell our team, your best referral source is that patient sitting right there in front of you. Like if you're not making a wow experience with them and making them go tell, family, friends, church members, associates, what have you, about the service they receive, man, the next referral's not coming through the door. In the early days, especially, now that we've grown a little bit, we get a lot of referrals from physicians because, we have a name now. But in the early days, man, it was all about creating that wow experience and doing whatever it took, whether it was, our treatment approach or, whether it was, coming in at 6 a.m. to treat somebody, coming in at 7 o'clock to treat somebody, doing things that other people aren't willing to do. And I know that we'll get to some questions later about difficulties in business and what it takes, and some of that fits into there. But yeah, I mean, our treatment approach is difficult. It's difficult. Like I said, it takes a very open mind, and it takes a lot of humility to say that, hey, I don't have it all figured out. But man, it's a very, very solid approach, and it's one that I feel like that we brought kind of big city care, back to the rural areas with that hometown, small town affection and mindset. So
That was a big difference because what year did you guys open?
2009.
So in 2009, that was a big difference. Is it still a big difference in the market today? Has the industry shifted more to the hands-on stuff?
No, it hadn't really. No. And that's one of the unique things that that it really hadn't, and the reason is because, like I just told you, it's very hard. I mean, you got to have, the people that you bring on board, the team that you bring on board has to share that same mindset, because we ask a lot of our therapists, man, a lot. And honestly, no, it's not a mindset that has shifted. Thankfully, thankful for us. But it's not. But it, that makes it harder to recruit, harder to retain in some ways, because you've got to have that mindset of never stop learning, never stop growing, and I'm willing to spend my free time, outside of work to be the best that I can be. So
Now, you started in Milan,
uh-huh.
and most people would think, I'm starting a business that requires a volume of patients. I'm going to go to Jackson or I'm going to go to Memphis. So why did you start in Milan?
I don't know. I don't know. Russ is from Weakley County. I'm from Dyer County. We thought Gibson County was underserved in some way, and Milan was a good launching point. But why we chose Milan, I really don't know. But I'm very thankful that we did. So yeah, launched in Milan in 2009. I saw my first patient in April 2009 in Milan. And one of my advices to the younger generation that are looking to start a business: start small. Start small. We started Dynamix with a $5,000 down payment on a $50,000 line of credit. So a lot of people think that, hey, you've got to have a lot of money to start a business. No, you don't. But you got to start small. So start small. Finish big was always our mindset. And Milan has turned out to be just a great spot. We had no connections in Milan. Okay, I mean, we had no relationships with doctors or people. There were times early on, when we were going to these small carnivals and setting up those putt golf mats for people to putt for T-shirts and things like that. I mean, we were maniacs. Okay, we were both single. Had no kids. I was renting a room in Russ's house is where I lived. So it was kind of one of those basement moments, almost. But that's one thing that I would say that it takes is, man, it just takes intense focus, and regardless of where you start. But the issue with starting in, say Jackson is, the cost of doing business is so much more, and we didn't have any money. Okay, but we both had, and we're both from rural families, rural towns. So we wanted to start rural too. And as you look at our model, going forward, it's a very rural based model. Okay. But if you want me to give you a reason of, hey, why did you pick Milan? I don't know, Kevin. I don't know. But it turned out, it worked out. It did.
So when you started the business, you talked about, $5,000 on a $50,000 credit. How long did it take you to start making money?
I took my first draw from the business a year later.
A year later. So a year, you did a year without taking any money out of the business. How do you do that?
Well, live very frugally, number one.
Live in your business partner's house.
Live in my business partner's house, number two. But I did some contract work for a home health agency. So whenever I wasn't treating patients, which was very often early on, I would go out to assisted living homes, people's houses and things like that to do treatment in homes to supplement my cost of living. So do you remember a BlackBerry? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wore a BlackBerry on my belt loop. Looked so cool with my BlackBerry right here sitting on my belt, walking around treating patients. And then, whenever I would leave to go do, a home visit or a nursing home visit or a transitional care visit, I would forward the clinic phone to my BlackBerry to take calls, from the clinic. And then, after about a year, started drawing a paycheck, and that's when Russ came in the clinic. After that. So yeah, I mean, it was a solid year before I took a dime from the business. But fortunately, the risk factor was fairly low because I had another side job that I could make money at. So I was able to, just sink everything that we made early on back into the business as an investment in growth. So.
Yeah, and the PT skill set, there's plenty of opportunities to side hustle, I'd think.
There is.
Yeah,
there is.
Now, pretty quickly, you guys looked at growing into Nashville.
Yeah, that's the story that not many people know about.
Yeah, so please tell me.
We rarely talk about this. So the plan was early on for me to launch Milan, and then Russ, who had some Nashville roots from his previous job, Franklin, Nashville, that area. He has connections there and roots there. So we rented space from what's called the West Side Athletic Club, which is no longer there. Okay, and we rented a room, and we built it out with a clinic. It was small. Built it out with a clinic. We painted it ourselves. We put the tables together ourselves. We did everything on our own because, again, I mean, at this time we couldn't afford to pay anybody. We did it all ourselves. So signed a year lease. Russ started in Nashville, for a week, and then we got so busy in Milan that I had to make the call of, hey, man, you're going to have to come home. Like, I need help. And so the plan was for him to come home just to right the ship, a little bit in Milan to get things, to match our volume. He never went back to Nashville. So we rented a space in Nashville. There was a Dynamix Nashville, back in 2009, 2010, that never saw a patient. Never. So we would pay our rent each month, not show up for work, and did that for a full year. Then after your year was up, we hired a moving company to get our equipment, and we brought it back to West Tennessee. Had orders on the fax machine. I'm sure there were tons of calls and voicemails about trying to set up. But yeah, I mean, Dynamix started as a company in Milan and Nashville that never saw a patient in Nashville, and that's one story that we don't talk about, and not a lot of people know. So I'm happy to talk about it on the podcast because it is kind of a secret that we've had. That we talk about it every so often, but not much. But it is something that's very unique to start a business and never go to work a day there. So.
All right. So now there are a bunch of locations, though. Uh-huh. So when did you know that you had something that was going to be able to, like, what was the moment that you're like, we've got this thing that's going to be a thing now?
Yeah, I think that in our first location, it was about 1,200 square feet. It was tiny. The gym was about the size of the room that we're in now. So you can imagine, we had tables set up, equipment set up. And we got to the point that we were having to put mats out on the floor for people to lay on for treatment. So, at that point, we realized that, hey, man, like, we got to get a bigger space. And, the company just kept growing and growing. And, we wanted, like, I've mentioned my sports medicine past, in the history of my athletic past, in the history of the company, in the history of my life. And, Russ had a very, very similar past as well. So we've always been interested in athletics. But, we wanted to start covering some sports. So we were in Milan, went to Trenton Peabody because we had heard that, obviously Trenton has athletics and sports, but, they weren't getting coverage. So we went and made a pitch, and it was one that, we talked to, doctors in the area and things like that. And they said, you'll never get Trenton Peabody sports. You'll never do it. Well, we got it. And I went and made a pitch to their football coach and basketball coach. Still Coach Allen, Coach Kent Scott, still very, very dear to me because they gave us a shot. So they gave us a chance to start covering Peabody athletics. The issue we had early on was that Peabody athletes were having to come to Milan for treatment. So we thought, we've got the school, we've got the volume. Why don't we just open a clinic in Trenton? Mm-hmm. Okay, so Trenton was our second location. And it was just to answer the demand of athletes and people driving to Milan for treatment. Hey, let's open a clinic there. So we launched that in 2012. I started as the director there, going back and forth between Milan. And then, as every, I think, new and growing company, the people you hire are your friends. So a good friend of mine, a guy named Ross Pope, has been with us ever since that time. Started in Milan, but we let him take over Trenton. And man, he has done a bang up job. Like I said, and as you know, and as everybody knows, you're only as good as your team. And we've done, fortunately, a really good job of bringing people, with a like mind onto this team. And Ross is one of them. So we knew after that first location, besides Milan, that hey, this thing has some legs. We think that we can really grow this, but it's because of people like Ross, who knows the grind. Ross still covers Peabody athletics to this day. Doesn't have to, wants to, because it's a passion of his. He's a server. So yeah, I think that's when we started knowing. It's just when the volume became so big that we couldn't keep up anymore. Mm-hmm. And we knew that at that time that, hey, we're doing something right. And we can talk later of how we diagnosed that right, that we were doing. Because I'm a firm believer that, if you're growing or you're struggling, you have to understand why. Okay. So we did some things to, understand how we were growing, why we were growing, and how that we can replicate this among a bigger scale than we had, thus far.
Well, yeah. So you start. What was the trigger to okay, we've got Milan, Trenton. You start hitting the gas because you guys have how many locations
19.
now? 19 at it's what it's November of 2025. You've got 19 locations right now. Some people would just be like, I'm good. I've got a location. I got 2 locations. We're good. I'm happy. We're good. But no, you guys continue to hit the gas and grow. Mm-hmm. What is that? Why is that? ATA is a leading advisory, tax, and accounting firm. From tax planning and client accounting services to advisory and assurance, ATA has got you covered with locations throughout West Tennessee and the Southeast. They have an expert nearby to support you. Let's amplify your business together. Contact the ATA team today at ata.net. Haven Insurance Partners is a locally owned independent insurance agency. Haven takes your risks, whether personal, commercial, health, or life, and approaches many different insurance companies on your behalf. This allows them to find different coverages and price points for you. At Haven, they believe you deserve options, and they want to help you explore those. Visit haveninsurance.com to find better coverage today.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because, I remember we were at a family function and my aunt, comes up to me. I think this time we're probably 2 or 3 or 4 clinics, and she comes up to me I didn't ask for this. She just came up to me and said, when is enough enough? I know, the stress, the energy, the emotional toll, that it takes. Why do you continue to grow? And I had never thought about that before. But my response was that when you're seeing lives changed every day, like we are, it's almost a responsibility. It's almost a calling to grow and spread. Why would I want to keep Dynamix bottled up in a very small part of West Tennessee or Northwest Tennessee even, and we're changing lives, but we're just going to keep it in Northwest Tennessee? So I feel like that it's a responsibility then, to grow and to serve people in, other parts of the state. And, we're in North Mississippi now, but in other parts of the world, so we didn't want to keep that bottled up because we knew that we were seeing life change, pretty much on a daily basis.
So speaking of that life change, near the beginning and I'd be interested to know when this has, you were doing so much PT work, and my understanding is you're not doing really PT
No,
work now. How how are you handling that like what is that transition like?
it was tough.
Yeah.
It's tough because I'm not a businessman by trade, and neither is Russ, my partner. We're PTs, we're physical therapists at heart. I mean, I love serving people. So yeah, I mean, it's been a tough transition. So I was in clinic, from 2009 until 2023, which was too long, in hindsight, because we weren't focusing enough on business growth, of actually leading and managing the business. So we were doing it, but it was just taking, so much of our time because, most of my time was dedicated into clinic. And then I was leading, managing, developing, growing in my free time. So yeah, I mean, I would say, looking back, that's one of the things I wish I'd done a little bit different. This came out of clinic a little bit earlier because once I've started to really, and Russ too, once we started to really focus on business growth, I mean, you can see, where the company's headed based on that strategy.
Tina mentioned that and said
You go
this.
from being loved by everybody that walks through and wants to see him. And then now he's on the business side of it. And I've even talked to him about that because when I come over to the gym side, I'm not treating as much, but I'm seeing exactly what he has talked about. He's like, yeah, you don't get that pat on the back, like, man, you make me feel so much better. So
you don't get that pat on the back anymore from whatever the patient in the world. So how have you reframed getting fulfillment of the business without that pat on the back?
Yeah, because she's right. I mean, when I was in clinic, I got my ego stroked all the time, because you're doing good work and you're changing lives and people want to tell you how good you are. And now, transitioning, you kind of have to reinvent yourself. Like I said, my background is not in business. By default, by trial and error early on, we became pretty good in business, but that's not my background. So, reinventing myself as someone that focuses on growth and development, marketing, branding, strategy, for a growing company, which I've always focused on that because that's been my avenue. I just always had that clinic too to go with it to, keep pushing me along per se. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge change. And like I said, I've reinvented myself, and that's a process that's ongoing. Before where a lot of my personal time went, in roles of, developing my clinical skills and professional skills. Now I'm developing myself in whole different ways. And that is a big challenge. And it's one that, I would say that's one of the toughest challenges that we faced is, Russ coming out and me coming out too, and taking on totally new roles full time. Before we were doing the same thing, and you really don't realize how tired you are until you come out of that dual role and start focusing on one role. But yeah, so before it was just, man, it was a very much so dual role, and then now it's a much more I would say defined role, much more strategic role, and I think that's shown up in business growth lately. We're doing great right now. So
Growth requires change.
the only constant in business is change in a growing company. The only constant in life is change. Change is part of life. But yeah, I mean, change is hard, but change is always necessary, though.
Now you've gone from 1 to 2 to 19. How do you plan a successful location addition?
The person.
Okay.
The easy thing is opening a clinic. The tough thing is finding the person to run the clinic.
And you say opening clinic, getting a lease.
Oh, that's easy.
Painting the walls.
That's easy.
Yeah.
That's easy. Our growth model revolves around people, not markets. So, every market I feel like is a pretty good market for us because, I feel like that we do, a lot of things right. The hard part is finding the person to lead the clinic. So whenever we decide to open a clinic, we get buy-in from the person going to lead. So, and I say that, what I mean is that we don't dictate where anybody goes. Okay, we collaborate with that potential director or leader of that clinic and ask where they want to be.
Unlike a Chick-fil-A
Right.
that says, we're going to go to these target markets this next year, you're finding the person
Right. We're finding
who
the
then
person.
says, I want to go to this town.
Absolutely. And usually we give them choices. There's 2 or 3 choices involved, but we let them pick because the thing is, when you're in rural markets and you dictate where somebody goes, they're going to last 6 months in, let's say, McKenzie, okay? Because they don't live in McKenzie. There's no buying in McKenzie. But we're having them drive 45 minutes to, a small town, to work in that community, and they just drive back home, and there's no really any buy-in because we've dictated that, hey, you have to go here, okay? They last 6 months, and they leave, the clinic closes, because we have nobody else. So, on the flip, if we let somebody tell us where they want to be, we've proven that that's a very, very fail-safe, mechanism, for opening a clinic is, I'll say it all the time, we collaborate and we don't dictate.
Makes sense.
But yes, I would say that most people think that we identify markets based on size, clinics that are in that town, all the demographic measures that somebody would typically look at. That's part of it, but the main thing is the person, though.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, have you had mentors along the way?
Oh, of course. Of course. I say all the time, nobody has ever been good at anything without a mentor. Okay, nobody just gets good at anything on their own. Even if that's a book, I mean, that's a mentor. Even if that's an online, an online mentor, through various, YouTube podcasts. I mean, that's still a mentor. So just because you don't have a person-to-person mentor, that doesn't mean that you've done something without a mentor. Everybody has a mentor. So yes, I've had a lot of in-person mentors along the way. I'm an avid book reader, an avid podcast listener, an avid YouTube watcher as it pertains to my profession. So yeah, I haven't gotten here on my own. I've had a lot of mentors along the way. Not even in the PT field per se, but just in the field of life too. So yes, ton of mentors, and all have played a very crucial role in where we are today. So
You've had a business partner since day one.
since day one.
Business partnerships can be very
Oh,
challenging.
it is challenging. It's like a marriage. I mean, it's like a marriage. So challenging, so challenging. Just like a marriage. I mean, there's compromise. There's admitting you were wrong. You talk to this person on a daily basis, and it's difficult. But when it's done right, it can work. Whenever whenever I was thinking about going into business, everybody says, don't do a partnership because they always fail. That they never last. Something always goes wrong. And I mean, it hadn't been perfect, by any means. But like I talked about earlier, Russ's strengths are a lot of my blind spots. He's an expert in operations, fiscal management, things of that nature. And then my strengths, marketing, brand development, go along with his blind spots as well. And that's not to say that he's not good in that. That's just where I'm really good. And that's not to say that I'm not good in operations. He's just better than I am. So I let him handle that. So we've in a sense divided and conquered, per se.
If you were advising someone tomorrow that's going to have a business partnership, do you have any thoughts that would help them to be successful based on your experience?
Just be prepared for hard times because they're going to come. I mean, and that's with a partnership or in solo ownership. There's gonna be hard times. It's not all peachy. Business ownership is not for everyone. I mean, it's just not. There's a ton of sacrifice that goes into starting a business, and I talk about sacrifice. Not It's kind of ugly, in a sense. I mean, sacrificing relationships and, time with your kids and things like that, that a lot of people aren't really prepared for. So, business ownership is ugly a lot of times. Business partnerships are ugly a lot of times. So you have to weigh what you're willing to do. Can you work with somebody? Can you compromise? Can you work in the frame of a team? There's just a ton of variables that go into it. But just know that solo or partnership, I mean, it's very difficult. We managed to start Dynamix in a time where, like I said, we were both single, had no kids, had no money, but that didn't matter. I could not imagine starting Dynamics married with a kid. Couldn't imagine. I mean, we're talking, 16-hour days, just going nonstop. I mean, like I said, we were maniacs, and that's the last person you want to compete with is the maniac. Somebody that's just going to do whatever it takes to make it work, and that was our mindset. So, for me, a partnership has been, very, very successful. I don't think that I could have done this on my own. Okay, I don't think that Russ could have done this on his own. So for us, it's worked, but the stats don't lie. Most partnerships don't. So I would say the only reason to get a partner is if you feel like you need a partner. But I think there's something to say for solo ownership. There's a lot of benefits that come with that. One of the downsides is you don't have anybody to bounce things off of. So you're making decisions on your own without that counterbalance to bounce things off of. So there's downfalls to solo ownership as well. The positive is obviously you're not held accountable by a partner. So, it's you. With a partnership, there's accountability there, a lot of accountability, which can be great and which can be, ugly at times too. So, both are a balance. But, just the amount of focus, that it takes, I think that's one thing that we've been able to do. When I say I've been focused on two things my whole life, and that's basketball, when I was younger, and that's PT, after I graduated college. I'm not focused on anything else really. I think anytime that you're opening a business, it takes just intense focus. And as you know, in today's world, man, there's a ton of things to pull your focus. They're endless. I mean, you've got to be comfortable with being bored. Okay, you've got to be comfortable with being by yourself, being bored, and just thinking, without a cell phone or TVs or friend, like all the things that we have in today's time to pull our focus away. And even I would say in 2009 when we opened, it's more difficult today than it was even then. Sure. But yeah, I mean, partnerships are great until they're not. Solo ownership is great until it's not. But there's positives and negatives both ways. Fortunately for us, it's worked out great because, like I said, I could not have done this on my own, and I know Russ would echo that he couldn't either. So,
when it comes to keeping your home comfortable and safe, trust the team that's been serving West Tennessee since 1999. Tim Ferguson Plumbing, Air, and Electric. With locations in Jackson and Memphis, Tim Ferguson offers complete home solutions for heating and cooling, indoor air quality, plumbing, whole home generators, and electrical. Their highly trained technicians are ready for any project, big or small. When you work with Tim Ferguson, you will always get honest, upfront pricing and financing options to fit your budget. From the team at Tim Ferguson, we are here when you need us. Keep your home running right with Tim Ferguson Plumbing, Air, and Electric. Visit timfergusonplumbing.com to schedule your service today. You might not know that I started my educational journey at a community college right after high school, which allowed me to have some time to make decisions for my future and save a lot of money on gen ed classes. Jackson State Community College provides that opportunity and many others for students in West Tennessee. Visit jscc.edu to see all their educational and career building opportunities.
All right, now we're going to start the lightning round. So what's a business book you'd recommend, or if you have a couple of top ones that you recommend?
my favorite author is Robert Greene.
Okay.
Human Psychology. I would recommend anything by Robert Greene. That's not, I would say, totally business related, but it's psychology and how to lead people effectively is more where that's at. A book like Mastery, talking about the time and the effort that it takes to master a skill, a single skill. 48 Laws of Power is a book that I like too. Kind of a more darker book, but very, very real. Laws of Human Nature. Anything by Robert Greene, I feel like it's great. I like Ryan Holiday too. That'd be more for personal growth, but I'm a firm believer that, the more personal growth that you invest in, the better you're able to lead people because you're better able to practice empathy. And I believe that empathy is a superpower, but I believe it's one that has to be developed. So, with my reading, especially now that I'm at a clinic, that's more of the stuff that I'm into, is how to lead. So, books by Robert Greene are fantastic. They're difficult reads, they're long reads, and they're tough reads. Ryan Holiday is more from a stoic mindset. But, for as far as personal structure, personal development, not taking things personal, the Four Agreements. Have you heard of that book, The Four Agreements?
No.
Very, very good book too. That book changed my life per se. The Four Agreements did. I would start with the Four Agreements and go there. That's not, again, that's not business strategy per se. That's more people strategy. But you have to realize that when you're opening a business and leading a business, and it's all about leading people. So that's where a lot of my time and resources go into is how do I lead better? How do I lead people better today than I did yesterday? So
You said empathy was a superpower.
yeah.
Can you unpack that just a little bit?
Sure. Taking, and I say that because, for you, having the skill set and the humility, and the mindset to understand why Kevin is thinking what he's thinking, and then I can better lead and manage you based on that. You're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, understand their actions, understand their mindset, and, knowing that, hey, it's not all about me. It's not all about Heath. It's about Kevin too. Why is Kevin thinking the way he's thinking? Can I get into Kevin's mind and understand what he's saying and why he's doing what he's doing? I believe that's a superpower because when you're able to do that, it helps you to lead people so much more effectively when you can truly understand someone, without only understanding yourself.
Yeah, makes sense. When is Heath having the most fun in business?
When we're growing. I mean, that's what I love. I love opening new clinics. I love empowering people. I always say that, I feel like that my superpower is empowerment. Empowering, somebody like Kevin, to be the best that he can be, to a level that he never thought possible. That's where I get my joy. I can remember, I started, we talked about Peabody Athletics earlier. I covered Peabody Athletics as well as Russ for the first 2 to 3 years. And then I handed it off to Ross. Okay. About 2 years after Ross started covering Peabody, I went back and stood on the sidelines with him, just to support and meet and greet and network and things like that. Nobody knew who I was. And I was so proud of that, because Ross had been empowered, to do something, and he took it and ran with it. So when I'm having the most fun is when I see my people growing, and that's through, like I said, opening clinics. That's empowering people to be directors and leaders and regional directors. That's when I have the most fun, when I see other people growing.
If you had to start over again tomorrow in business and, blank slate, are you going to do PT again, or are you going to do something different?
I think I would do something different. What that is, I don't know. There might come a time where I'm not, in PT anymore. I think it would definitely be something different. PT has been great for me. That's my passion. That's my love. And that's what started me in business. But being in business for 16 years now, you grow as a business person too. You have to, or you're going to stagnate and die. If the time ever came, I think it would be something a little bit different. Probably still in the health field though. I'm big into human longevity, biohacking, things like functional medicine, things like that. And I do think even that's where our company's headed. But I think that's where the health field's headed as well. What that would be, I don't know, and that day may never come. I don't know. But obviously, you have thoughts about, hey, if this ever ends, what would I do after that? I mean, I'm 45, I'm not really at retirement age by any means. What would I do in a second life? I don't know what the answer is. I would not see myself going and starting a PT company again from scratch, just because I know what it takes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know what it takes.
And it's a little bit like, if I look back, you're like, I don't want to do that again, but you fortunately don't know at the beginning.
I don't know if I could do that again,
Yeah,
Kevin.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I mean, like I said, that's the one thing that, and we talk about the difficulties in business and, what's the hardest thing is the sacrifice that it takes. I mean, it takes an intense and huge sacrifice, that has tentacles that reaches, family, friends, kids, because you're sacrificing a lot to get something off the ground. So I don't know that I could do it again, to be honest with you.
That's okay. What's the future Dynamics look like, you think?
To continue to grow. We've got plans right now to open in different parts of the state. I don't really want to reveal
Because
those
y'all
right
are
now.
just West Tennessee right now.
West Tennessee and North Mississippi.
Okay.
So, our growth plans include, other parts of the state. And like I said, our growth model revolves around people. So we've got people that are, have very good leadership potential. We've started a leadership cohort within the company, that trains our clinicians and empowers them to be leaders. And then, like I said, they pick where they want to go. So we've got some people, that work in West Tennessee right now that have roots in Middle Tennessee that have just chose to come to West Tennessee, to understand the company, to understand the culture, to understand the approach, to understand what it takes. And, the selling point to them was, hey, if you do that, then when you're ready to go back to your hometown, we're there with you. Growth plans in Middle Tennessee, and, we're looking at some other states as well. But the goal is to grow just out of West Tennessee. We like Arkansas, Mississippi, somewhat maybe Kentucky too. So the goal is just to continue to grow the brand, and that starts with recruiting the right people though. And I will say it's one of the toughest challenges in Northwest Tennessee, because a lot of times if you're not from Northwest Tennessee, you're not going to pick up and move here because it's so rural. Especially if you're a single guy or a single girl. The appeal of West Tennessee, a lot of times it's not that great. But when you can sell, hey, we're a visionary company, we're a growing company, we have a vision, we want to help you be the best that you can be. We just need you to come and work and be part of this organization here in West Tennessee for a couple of years. Then, hey, we can expand back to where you want to be. Because like, as when you're building a brand, you've got to be consistent. We can't just go open a clinic in, say, Middle Tennessee with somebody who's never trained, in West Tennessee with us, because then you don't have a brand. You have clinics in West Tennessee and clinics maybe in Middle Tennessee or Mississippi or wherever that are different from your clinics in West Tennessee, and you can't have that when you're building a brand. One of the hallmarks of building a brand is being consistent. So the experience that somebody has, in Dynamix Milan has to be the same experience they have in Dynamix Corinth. It has to be. Part of getting them on board, and training them is understanding the brand, and keeping that brand consistent. We say that our brand has 3 hallmarks. That's consistency, quality, and experience. And understanding those hallmarks and what it takes to fulfill each of those hallmarks before you go back and open the clinic where you're from.
Makes sense. You said you're 45 earlier.
45,
you
yeah.
got a lot of career ahead of you.
Uh-huh.
But have you thought about what you want your legacy to be yet?
Yeah, and this is like I said, I have a mentor, and a guy from Michigan, and we've done leadership training with him, and I've done a lot of personal coaching one-on-one with him. So I do have a leadership coach. So I'm not, this is, like I said, this isn't all me. I've had mentors and people like that along the way, and I always say I want my legacy to be one of empowerment. I want you to feel like that. Man, Heath did all that he could do to help me reach the best that I could be. And that's my, that's what I tell our people is, my job now that I believe in business, you have 2 roles. One, you're either serving the customer, serving the patients, or number 2, you're serving the people who serve the customers on the front line. My job is now to serve my people who are on the front line serving the customers. They're my customers. My people, my team is my customers. I'm accountable to them. That's why I hate the term boss and things like that. That implies a hierarchy and more of a dictatorship and a management style. I guess if you want to look at it from a traditional standpoint, I'm your boss, but ultimately I feel like I work for you. And my job is to be accountable to you, and my job is to help you be the best that you can be. So when it's all said and done, my hope is that people on this team, our PTs, our clinic directors, our regional directors, would be that Heath really helped me be the best. Like I never thought that I could be this good. Heath helped me reach levels, in this profession, that I never thought that I could reach. And I believe on my part that takes humility, sacrifice. It takes a lot of effort. But yeah, when it's all said and done, I want to be one that empower people.
Well, Heath, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
It's been great, man.
Enjoyed talking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you for listening to 40 by 45, the West Tennessee Business Podcast. The best way to support the show is to tell others about it. The more downloads we get, the more likely we are to continue telling these stories. This series is produced by Adelsberger Marketing, recorded and edited by Jacob Beals, branding by Katie Howerton, motion graphics by Ricky Santos, and produced and hosted by me, Kevin Adelsberger. Special thanks to Eric Archer, who helped create Season 1 and set us on this course. If you're interested in creating a podcast for your business, connect with us at adelsbergermarketing.com. Thank you for listening.